soaring meat prices.
The D.C. Americans for Democratic Action.
Their nationwide boycott temporarily succeeded in lowering prices at the meat counter.
Consumers have pressure, and we're going to bring all the prices down right across the board.
In Pittsburgh, the newly organized Alliance for Consumer Protection picketed local merchants on behalf of consumers.
What I learned was that there were other organizations throughout the United States that were independent of us, but were doing the same kind of thing. And I learned about something called the consumer movement without knowing it in advance. We just were part of it.
An important achievement for consumer groups was a ban on television cigarette advertising. One weapon was the counter commercial. The record of consumer legislative reform passed in the late 1960s and 70s was impressive. It included major bills on auto and highway safety, truth in packaging and lending, credit, product safety, and warranties. In 1977, the reformers tried to pass an ambitious bill for a new federal consumer protection agency, an idea first proposed in the 1930s. And the business community launched an organized counterattack.
During the consumer movement's heydays, OSHA was created, EPA was created, the Consumer Product Safety Commission was created, consumer laws were moving willy-nilly through the Congress, warranty laws, truth in packaging laws, if you will. The American business community believed there were already enough consumer laws moving. You didn't need another agency on top of all the others. Make those that are already here work. And that's as simplistic as I can make it, because there were already enough lawyers and regulations bombarding them that they didn't want the specter of yet a super agency on top of that.
Such critics felt that excessive regulation inflated prices to consumers, stifled innovation, and drained competitive forces in the economy by adding an exorbitant cost burden to industry. In the late 1970s, a major target of such deregulatory sentiment was the Federal Trade Commission and its proposed new rules. Among them, new regulations for the life insurance industry, used car dealers, and TV ads directed at children for sugar-coated cereals. In each case, it was rebuffed. Herb Bloch's cartoon is captioned, "This agency is guilty of acting like a regulatory agency." The FTC's chairman in 1984, James C. Miller, believes it was then an agency out of control.
Well, in the antitrust area, it was engaged in what someone characterized as Star Trek law enforcement. That's boldly going where no man had dared to go before. And it lost, in fact, 60% of its cases on appeal. And in the consumer protection area, it was engaged in what even the Washington Post characterized as national nannyism. And so those excesses, I think, needed to be reined in, and Congress essentially told the agency to cut out the excesses.
What those laws basically said is that while we don't really like government intervening in much of our lives, and we never have as Americans, we recognize that business, especially larger businesses, is subject to a whole range of temptations. And government is the only legitimate restraining force for those temptations, whether it be unfair methods of competition to drive competitors out of business, or the temptation to lie in advertising, or to exploit the vulnerable in our society.
Even if the FTC had been able to get all the new rules it wanted, that would have been only part of the battle. Another aspect, as perceived by consumer activists, lay in the enforcement of laws already on the books. The tragedy that took a young life in Austin, Texas, despite existing federal vehicle safety regulations, is a case in point. Coming down the road was a 1979 Mack tractor trailer carrying U.S. mail. The driver of the trailer applied his brakes when he saw the caution light. Suddenly, he had no brakes. He honked his horn and tried to flash his lights. The truck proceeded through the intersection. It broadsided a pickup truck, killing 19-year-old Wayne Ramirez instantly. Court records from a 1984 lawsuit show that as early as 1977, there were numerous reports of truck brake failure traced to a faulty valve made by the Wagner Electric Corporation. By November of 1979, complaints had come to the attention of the Federal Office of Defects Investigation. ODI began an inquiry, asking Mack Truck for details. Mack and Wagner engineers met at Mack headquarters in Allentown, Pennsylvania on December 6, 1979. A memo of that meeting was introduced as evidence during the trial. In it, a Mack executive advised that there were two options. One, a total recall of some 45,000 trucks at a cost of $50 a truck. Two, what was termed the soft approach, to contend that the claim of a faulty brake valve had no merit and not to recall. According to trial testimony, Mack and Wagner chose the soft approach. By the end of 1984, despite safety regulations already on the books, the defective valves costing $6.39 each were still on the road in thousands of Mack trucks as well as in those of other companies. Attorney for the plaintiff, Tom Harkness.
Mack Truck and Wagner kept $2.25 million in their pockets back in that corporate boardroom in December of 1979 when they didn't recall the valve. Jenny Davis lost a son. And I can't accept that as an individual that has to go out and drive on our streets and roads.
The day is closing.